Well, I think we'll have one more, and then I'll invite you all to come forward and look at these items.
I'm just curious how you go about authenticating the signatures if they're so close like that.
Well, that's a good question. The word authenticating for a signature is a bit of a misnomer. It is impossible to prove that something is Lincoln's signature unless it happens to be on the bottom of the Gettysburg Address that we know for. And providing sufficient historical context is key. Analysis of the paper is very helpful. This forgery case that I mentioned coming to court in Florida soon hinges in part on the paper that it's on. The ink also. Now people can fake the ink. The ink that was in use in Lincoln's day was still being sold commercially into the 1930s. And that's how, in part, Joseph Cozy, who was the most prolific forger of Lincoln documents, made his meager living to keep himself drunk and high on heroin. That's mostly what he spent it on. He didn't know a thing about Illinois law. And so he made very obvious mistakes in the legal papers that he was forging all the time. And he didn't know anything about Illinois geography either. He was working in New York. There are other people who are a little more canny, but it is possible to age ink artificially. But if you look at it under a microscope, and we have done that in 2 or 3 cases, you see how the ink is no longer sitting just right on the paper. It's begun to crack because it's been stressed by heat and chemicals to make it look older, that is, to change color. I think that may do it for this. Please come on forward, and thank you all for your attention.
James,
yes.
Do you think you could briefly describe the items that you're going to put on the table before you do that? That way you don't have to repeat yourself 50 times.
One is a lovely silver-plated coffee urn, which the Lincolns gave as a couple to a young couple getting married here in Springfield in 1859. One is a bust of Jack Lincoln, their grandson, who died at the age of 18 in London while his father Robert was U.S. minister to the Court of St. James's there. Interesting point about the bust, it was made by the son of the man who made that second life mask of Lincoln that is on display, in a copy of which is on display in the museum. And it's the only likeness of Jack outside of photographs. Then there are a couple of Lincoln documents. One of them that I mentioned, 2 long blue lined pieces of paper that are legal documents for Maria Bullock, who was a distant relative of Mary Lincoln's from Kentucky, who owned some property here in the Springfield area. And this was one of the most complicated cases that Lincoln ever undertook. It lasted 9 years in the courts, and he had to teach himself all kinds of things about property law and surveying, which he already knew, but he was a little rusty on that. And one long document after another. So it's a very interesting case because, for one, Maria Bullock was a woman and owned property, and there's something you don't think about all that often for the Civil War period. Then a bit of a surprise, there's a very, very famous Hollywood actress named Marilyn, I'll leave you to guess the last name, holding a photograph of Abraham Lincoln while she's standing up in a parked sports car with the roof down in California. She was a big Abraham Lincoln fan. And oh yes, and those and that very faded purple cloth volume of the Nicolay and Hay biography of Lincoln. Don't let that happen to your books. Thank you.
I'm sure I speak for myself and everyone else in this room. Thank you very much this evening for doing this.
You're welcome.
Did Linda have some? Linda doesn't have any notes, so once again, thanks for coming, you guys. And as you leave, please come by to the table and check out the items. But of course, remember the key rule: don't touch.